Last month, unemployment reached its lowest level in 51 years.
We've created 6.4 million new jobs. Just last month, unemployment reached the lowest rate in over 50 years.
Since my election, and everybody in the fake news would have said that's absolutely impossible.
Donald Trump sings his own praises about, well, a lot of things, including the unemployment rate. It is lower than it's ever been since 1969 at around 3.5%. But there's a lot that the employment rate doesn't reveal, such as the number of people who've stopped looking for work altogether and the quality of jobs available. Much of the landscape is made up of low-wage service sector jobs. My next guest, journalist Emily Guendelsberger, went undercover to better understand the challenges that low-wage workers are facing in this country. Here she is sharing what some Amazon employees told her.
People say, well, I've worked for such and such warehouse. Surely it's not that different. No, it is different. It's downright dehumanizing. Worst job I've ever had, and I worked at a goddamn McDonald's. I've never seen psychological abuse anywhere like I've seen at Amazon. The temp agencies that Amazon uses are atrocious. They absolutely treat you like human waste. There's no room for getting tired. The pay and benefits are usually good, but it's just not worth it if you don't like being a complete robot.
Emily Guendelsberger documents her experience working at Amazon, at McDonald's, and at the mega call center company Convergys. It's all in her new book, On the Clock, What Low-Wage Work Did to Me and How It Drives America Insane. She joins me now to discuss what these companies' business practices reveal about the future of work. Emily Guendelsberger, welcome to Intercepted.
Hey, how's it going?
What was your motivation when you approached writing this book?
Before my newspaper went out of business in 2015, I had just done this very long piece on Uber, did something similar. I went undercover with quotes, because it's not like, you have to make anything up. They just hire kind of everybody.
Right, you weren't wearing like a fake mustache.
No. Uber was coming into Philly's market at that time, and they were doing so without approval from, government or whatever. So they were just kind of like barging their way in, and their defense of this was like, we're creating really good jobs. Like the average Uber driver, they make $90,000 a year. And I was like, no, like that is not true. That cannot be true. Because whenever I would, take one of these, it was exactly the same people that were driving cabs. They had just switched platforms, and they all, when I talked to them, complained about making much less money than they used to, which before was not like $120,000. It was already, 50 or 60, maybe if they were, working a lot. The whole Uber business model, which is the thing that, most of the gig economy is sort of built around, is just sort of their ability to skirt regulations. I remember I was, talking to a warden class about this one time, and somebody like in the class was like, hey, so what would happen if they did make everybody get classified as an employee? It wouldn't exist anymore. Or else it would be like $20 a ride no matter what. They're passing off most of the risks and costs of doing business, along with like all of the downtime, because you don't get paid when you're sitting around. It's sort of like they've solved the problem that businesses have had of like, McDonald's slogan, if you've got time to lean, you've got time to clean.
Hey, you got time to lean, you got time to clean, buddy, all right?
Uber's business model has eliminated time to lean entirely, because when you're leaning, you're not getting paid at all.
Talk about the companies that you chose to work at for this book, Amazon, Convergys, and McDonald's. Let's start with McDonald's.
You just are so constantly understaffed, and it's on purpose. It's sort of like implementing the ideas of like Toyota production system and like lean.
At the heart of the Toyota production system are the concepts of intelligent automation and just-in-time manufacturing.
Instead of just applying them to the supply chain and to like your inventory, they started saying like, well, we do this to all these products. We could just do this to our people too. The idea is to have the most flexibility possible for the company, and workers are expected to give up their own flexibility in exchange. So, for example, with McDonald's, they supply the computer systems that help you algorithmically schedule your employees based on the data that they've been collecting about how busy the store has been over the past year. Like, what was it like on this day last year? What was it like on the same day last week? What was it like yesterday? the reason that you get all these crazy schedules for people in retail and fast food, and on a lot of the time very short notice, unless you live in a big city that's passed, some sort of law that you can't give people their schedules one day in advance. So it makes it kind of impossible for workers to plan anything involving their lives anymore. The schedules are all very irregular because they are slotting in people to exactly fit the business that they predict, which means like you get crazy things like clopen, which is you work until close, which can be like 2 a.m, and then you're scheduled to open the next day, which can be at 5 or 6 a.m, with like just a couple hours in between.
And now is it that they just sort of say, well, the computer says you're coming in?
That's exactly it. And that's sort of kind of a theme with all of these things is technology is a way to sort of pass responsibility onto some non-person thing. It's just like, well, just logic and math and reason made it this way. Like, so whatever. This is the way it's the most efficient, so this is the way it's going to be. And there's just no value whatsoever put onto like how difficult this makes life for people. Like whether you're able to ever plan a visit to your parents, whether you're ever able to meet up with your friends, whether you know that you can pick your child up from daycare on time, or whether you're going to have to fight to leave on time, which you frequently are.
You talk about research failing to prepare you for just how dehumanizing this work was. Share with people what you mean by that it was dehumanizing.
You are competing sort of almost with robots. You're sort of being, as a human, held up to robotic standards. There are, of course, things that humans can do much better than robots, and they're going to be much better at them for a long time, like picking stuff up, like visually recognizing things, like interpreting what, human speech and responding in kind. But the benefits of those that humans have are kind of matched by what are seen as the downsides of human workers as compared to robots, such as like, human workers have families. They need to pick their kids up from daycare, so they need to be able to stop at a certain time. They need to use the bathroom. They get sick. Like, they have to take time off. But right now, a lot of low-wage workers are in competition with these robots, which drives down wages and also sort of drives people to compress themselves, like compress their needs outside of work to make it no problem at all, like to not be a problem, any more problem than a robot would be to the company. So you're basically incentivizing these people to pretend like they have no needs on pain of losing their jobs. And that is the biggest dehumanizing thing, I think, is that they do treat you like you're a robot, and there is really not very much thought given or value put on, like, is this awful? Like, is this awful to do? Is this an awful job? Are you going to give these people repetitive stress injuries? Are people having panic attacks out on the floor of the call center, which I saw 2 of those. I was only there for a month, and they were both in my 20-person group. It was wild.
This was at Convergys?
Yeah, at Convergys.
Let's talk about your experience at Amazon. So lay out for us how you got the job, where it was, and what you were doing.
I sort of started doing this project on a whim. I didn't really have a book contract. It was just that my newspaper had just gone out of business with a week's notice, and I was kind of heartbroken, and I couldn't go get another newspaper job that soon after that had happened. So I was like, hey, I've always wanted to see what it's like in an Amazon warehouse. I've always been really curious. And a friend of mine hooked me up with his aunt who lived outside Louisville, Kentucky. I arrive, I spend the night there, I go apply the next day. It was like 3 days between my arriving in Louisville and starting orientation.
And what was the job that you were hired to do?
I was hired for picking, which is generally regarded, I think, as the least desirable job at warehouses. We would get a cart, and we have this scanner. There were about, I think it was 4 or 5 steps to going out to locate the coordinates that it gave you and find the actual whatever the thing was. You would just walk around all day and do that. Every single step of this was accompanied by a little countdown at the bottom of the screen. There is a blue bar. It says how many seconds you have left to do it, and then it would start ticking those seconds down. So it's kind of constantly reminding you like, hey, move, keep moving, keep moving. You are not keeping up.
What happens if you don't do it in the sufficient amount of time as determined by the machine in your hand?
Well, it'll blink at you a little bit, and it'll tell you you have 0 seconds remaining. But what really happens is you have a rate that you're supposed to be making that day. It was generally 90 to 100 items per hour. You never were quite sure exactly where the line was if you went too slow or had too much, they called it time off task, which is just anything where you were not actively working and doing what they wanted you to do, like using the bathroom or getting water. And a little bit of time off task was okay. They say, like, people are always free to use the bathroom. Technically true, yes. But that's the thing. If you are on, like, the 4th floor and you're way out in this huge mod, this place is the size of, like, multiple football fields. It can take you, like, 15 minutes minimum to get to a bathroom and back.
This description that you're offering right now, at one point, you write about this in the book, you took a voice memo where you start off with, quote,
fuck your sexy candy corn costume. Fuck your endless Michael Kors bags. Fuck your 10 pounds of Twizzlers. Fuck your NFL branded Team Gnome.
And then you go on with more. Fuck your fucking Amazon gift card. Seriously, what kind of asshole orders an Amazon gift card off fucking Amazon? What was going on at that moment?
All the jobs there are on your feet for pretty much the entire day. But pickers are actually walking, and I snuck in a step tracker. The step tracker recorded, like, a usual day after I had sort of gotten used to it was 13 to 16 miles a day of walking around this crazy mod. And it is on concrete, and it is really painful. Everybody told me that, like, your first 2 weeks are going to be really awful. First day, I'm like, wow, this place looks amazing. Like, here's, like, how the scanner works. There's this very steep decline in my mood that you can just hear very clearly in the voice memos. So, yeah, like, after a few days, I just, like, hate everyone and everything. It just started getting infuriating. You just never want to buy anything ever again because there's just so much stupid stuff that nobody needs.
What is the vibe among the workers in the mod and in these warehouses?
When you're a picker and you're out in this crazy mod, in these shelves, the aisles between the shelving, they're only wide enough for one person with one cart. So, like, the algorithms that sort of send you around on your pick paths all around the warehouse, they're doing this for, several hundred people at the same time. It's a miracle of programming. It's incredible. But they keep you apart, both so that you aren't going to, run into each other in an aisle and someone has to back out. But honestly, it's, I think, intentionally so that you can't talk to each other. And honestly, like, the physical part of this was not the problem for me. Don't get me wrong, it hurt a lot. It hurt more than anything I've ever done, actually, and I've done a lot of painful things. But just the monotony and the isolation, like being alone for 11 hours a day, really gets to you.
You compare productivity management to a Simpsons episode where Homer is overseeing a group of engineers.
Are you guys working?
Yes, sir, Mr. Simpson.
Could you, work any harder than this?
Sure thing, boss.
How has the concept of productivity and managing workers' productivity evolved? Like, what have you found on that?
I think the fundamental concept is actually the same, and it's sort of been the same since Taylorism, like back in the 1890s. Frederick Taylor sort of came in, and he was, like, kind of obsessed with the idea that increasing productivity and efficiency was going to cure poverty, something that is still very much an undercurrent today. He's like, yeah, if you can time people and monitor them and sort of yell at them into doing 3 times the amount of work that they were doing before, they'll be able to produce 3 times as much, they'll get paid more, and voila, no more poverty. Cool. Except, like, that all depends on workers actually being cut in on, the increases in their productivity, which they are not.
On this issue, you write, the less obvious but equally important effect of Taylorism was breaking the power that skilled workers held over the pace of work and the operations of factories. He began disassembling skilled jobs into multiple smaller unskilled jobs, often designing specialized tools to replace a skilled worker's, quote, sorcery and black magic knowledge base.
skilled workers, they used to be sort of in control of how fast work was done. And Taylor, he was sort of like the 1890s equivalent of like Bill Gates or somebody that dropped out of college just to do a startup or something in his garage. Like Taylor, he was like a rich guy from Philly. He was supposed to go to Harvard, but instead he was like, you know what? I'm going to go work at a steel mill instead. And I'm going to start at the bottom. And I'm going to work my way up. And I'm going to understand everything about how a steel mill runs. And while he was sort of working his way up, he saw how the skilled workers who had been there longest and were most senior and were hardest to replace because their jobs were, very skilled, they usually sort of set the pace of work themselves by something called, soldiering. It's just, all right, we're all going to work this hard. Nobody go above that, or, you're going to be looked at poorly or possibly, get beat up. He saw that as like literal evil. So he, first thing is starting to time things and figure out how long everything should be taking, exactly like, Amazon does, but just much more high tech. And then he also started purposely disassembling these skilled jobs. One of the things that people got angriest with, like factory workers, when Taylor came to their factories and started Taylorizing their stuff, is that like they hated deskilling almost as much as they hated the speed up of work that always accompanied Taylor's visits. If you can't take pride in your work, you can't take pleasure in your work. And it's very hard to take pleasure in your work if like this is something that a robot could do. In this version of, very carnivorous capitalism we have is afforded a value of 0. It doesn't matter whether people can take pride in their jobs. It doesn't matter whether they're miserable all day or they kind of like enjoy their 8 hours or however many hours they spend at work.
At the beginning of the book, you write about think pieces like puzzling over how and why millennials aren't achieving the same markers of adulthood as past generations.
How do you like this? More young adults are living high up the hog on mom and dad and not working than we've seen in ages.
Young adults today are more likely than previous generations to get financial help from their parents.
Millennials may be shaping a lot of things in American culture, but they're not adding to society in one big way: having babies.
Why do you think people have such a hard time grasping the reality that a big part of the reason that people can't afford to live, can't afford to have families, can't afford to buy a home is because they have no money, despite the fact that they're working 40 plus hours a week?
So there's like an actual linguistic problem with talking about work between classes. When people talk about these things, there's a completely different understanding of what good benefits means between classes. And there's a similarly different misunderstanding of what hard work is, of what actual hard work is. Like, honestly, the hardest jobs I've ever had have been the ones that are the lowest paying. Like, that's the ones where someone's always on you. Like, somebody is always watching you. You don't have any freedom. It's the further up the scale you go, the easier jobs tend to get, frankly. And I think a lot of people see it as the other way around. My experience was not the same, and I didn't have nearly as much problems as most people do. I didn't have to take care of kids. Like, that was the only thing that I was there to do. And most other people, like, were, again, in worse shape than me, and were doing this without this dangling carrot of, like, you only have to do this for a month. It's okay.
As we wrap this up, your view on what you're hearing out of the Democratic candidates in 2020 when it comes to these specific issues that you've been writing about, and sort of what you think needs to change going forward, or is it too far along?
What's not very well understood by the media, or I think most politicians running for office, is if they have not really interacted with a lot of McDonald's workers lately, like if they haven't really interacted with any Amazon like warehouse employees, they don't know how hard things are right now. And they don't know how angry people are about this and how stressed out they are and how desperately ready for something else, for something different, for some change. People are ready for it, is what I'm saying. And I think underestimating the desire for anything but this, I think that's how Trump got elected, because he was outwardly angry about how hard people had it right now, working class people. I knew a lot of Trump voters. Like, I met them at these various jobs. None of them really actually liked the guy, honestly. They're just like, maybe he'll do something different. Like, this sucks. Doing another Clinton will suck. It'll suck the same way it sucked for the past 20 or 30 years. Biden's, like, nothing is going to change. Things are just going to go back to the way they were in 2015 is a terrible, terrible shoot yourself in the foot message. Like, unless the person who is running against Trump is outwardly able to be angry and let people know that they are outraged at what has happened to you and to your family. They're outraged that your son is addicted to, opioids. They're outraged that, like, your factory closed and now your $25 an hour job is a $9 an hour job on the phone, having panic attacks and getting screamed at all day by just jerks. It sucks right now, unless people acknowledge that, like, America ain't so great right now, then we're going to lose.
Emily Guendelsberger, thank you very much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Emily Guendelsberger is a journalist and author of On the Clock, What Low-Wage Work Did to Me and How It Drives America Insane. You can find her on Twitter at Emily G. That's G-E-E. And that does it for this week's show. You can follow us on Twitter at Intercepted. We are also now dipping our toe into the waters of Instagram, where you can find us at Intercepted Podcast. If you like what we do, you can support our show by going to theintercept.com/join to become a sustaining member. Intercepted is a production of First Look Media and The Intercept. Our lead producer is Jack Dizadoro. Our producer is Laura Flynn. Elise Swain is our associate producer and graphic designer. Betsy Reed is editor-in-chief of The Intercept. Special thanks to the wonderful Charlotte Greensit for playing the role of a British news presenter with gusto. Rick Kwan mixed the show. Transcription for this program is done by Nuria Marquez Martinez. Our music, as always, was composed by DJ Spooky. Until next week, I'm Jeremy Scahill.